aside, both of you! Back of the line!
Ma'am, we're flying first class too.
Girls like you don't buy first class, sweetheart. You beg your way up front.
We're in 2A and 2B, paid in full. Paid with what? Some sugar daddy? That is enough, ma'am.
One more word and you're banned for life. Security! Get this trash away from my counter!
Passengers walked past them at gate B22, row after row. Nobody spoke. Danielle was 19. Her fingers tightened around the photograph in her wallet. Their grandfather's memorial started at 4. Talia's face showed nothing, only a frightening calm and eyes burning like fire. Marlene felt untouchable. Within the hour, she would have to beg for forgiveness. Have you ever watched someone in power realize far too late exactly who they just humiliated? Because you are about to drop a comment telling me where you were watching from, hit that like button, and let me take you back to the beginning. The morning had started with sunlight and a plan. At 10:40, the Denver concourse was the brightest room in Colorado. Meridian Atlantic had opened its new terminal that week, and the whole hall was glass and white steel. Light came down through the roof in wide, clean sheets. Banners hung above the walkway, half of them still wrapped in plastic. A ribbon stretched across the entrance to the new wing, waiting for scissors and cameras at noon. Talia Granger had checked the flight 3 times before they left the apartment. Gate B22, departure 11:05, seats 2A and 2B, bought 11 days earlier, paid in full, printed at the kiosk that morning because Danielle liked holding paper. Their grandfather's memorial started at 4 o'clock in Charlotte. Amos Granger had raised both girls on Sunday afternoons and terrible jokes. He had taught Talia to change a tire and Danielle to iron a collar. He died on a Tuesday quietly in his chair. The service had been set for 4, and the family had asked the sisters to sit in the front row. That was the entire reason they were standing at gate B22 in dark clothes at 10:40 in the morning. Marlene Radcliffe had worked that gate for 22 years. She knew the rhythm of it better than she knew her own street. Board the wheelchairs, board the crews, board the first class, then the rest of the world. She liked the podium. She liked the microphone. She liked the small moment when 300 strangers waited on her voice. She called the first-class group at 10:42. Talia and Danielle stepped forward with everyone else. Marlene scanned the man ahead of them, then the couple behind him, then a woman with a garment bag. When the sisters reached the podium, she looked up, and something in her face closed, like a door. "Step over there," she said. "Not you two." Talia held out both passes. "Ma'am, you just called our group. I called first class." "That's us, 2A and 2B." Marlene did not take the passes. She did not lift the scanner. She looked at the 2 young women in front of her, at their dark clothes and their small bags. Then she made a decision that had nothing to do with the paper in their hands. "Wait to the side," she said. "I'll deal with you when the real passengers are on." Curtis Bellamy, the shift supervisor, was standing 4 feet away with a tablet. He heard all of it. He looked at the sisters, then at Marlene, then back at his screen. He nodded once and walked toward the next gate. The line kept moving. Row after row went past them and down the jet bridge. Overhead, the terminal announcement system chimed twice. "Good morning from Meridian Atlantic. Company leadership is on property today for the opening of Concourse B. Please welcome our executive team." Marlene did not look up. She was already calling the next boarding group. 6 rows behind a woman named Rosalind Pike lowered her coffee, turned in her seat, and started to watch. The last row boarded at 10:51. The line was gone. The rope stanchions stood empty. The jet bridge door was open, and a flight attendant leaned out of it waiting on the final count. Talia and Danielle still stood where Marlene had put them, 3 feet left of the podium. Every seat in the gate area could see them. Talia walked back to the counter. "Ma'am, we're the last 2. Can you scan us now?" Marlene held out her hand, palm up. "Passes and identification." Talia gave her both boarding passes and both driver's licenses. It was the last time either sister held them for the next 40 minutes. Marlene laid the 4 items on the counter side by side like cards in a game she had already won. She did not touch the scanner. She picked up the licenses, held them at arm's length, and looked from the photographs to the faces and back again. "These don't look right." "They're state IDs," Talia said. "They were issued in Denver." "I know what an ID looks like, sweetheart." Danielle stepped closer to her sister. She was 19 years old, and she had never once in her life been called a criminal in front of strangers. Marlene reached for the microphone. The click of the podium mic carried to the back wall. 300 travelers looked up from their phones at the same moment. "Attention at gate B22, we are working a documentation issue with 2 passengers at the counter. Boarding is delayed. Thank you for your patience." She set the microphone down and smiled at the sisters. It was a small, satisfied smile. "Now everybody knows," she said. That was the first thing she did that she could never take back. Talia felt her ears go hot. She kept her hands at her sides and her voice level. She had learned young what happens to a black woman who raises her voice in an airport. "Ma'am, my name is Talia Granger. Can I have your employee number, please?" "Excuse me?" "Your employee number. It's printed on your badge." Marlene turned the badge over so the number faced her chest. "You don't need that." "Then I'd like a supervisor. You're looking at the only person who matters at this gate." Behind them, the flight attendant in the jet bridge doorway looked at her watch and stepped back inside. Marlene came out from behind the podium. She did it slowly, the way a person does when she wants everyone to see her do it. She stopped in front of the sisters' 2 carry-on bags. "Open them." Talia did not move. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I said so. Bag inspection happens at the security checkpoint. We cleared it an hour ago, and now it happens here." Marlene raised her voice pitched for the crowd. "You want to fly? Open the bags." Talia looked at the clock above the gate. 10:56. She looked at Danielle, who was already crying without sound, the way people cry when they are trying very hard not to. She thought about the front row of the church in Charlotte at 4 o'clock. Then she knelt on the terminal floor in the bright morning light and unzipped her bag in front of 300 strangers. Marlene crouched and went through it with 2 fingers, item by item, lifting each one high enough to be seen. A folded black dress, a pair of shoes wrapped in a plastic bag, a laptop with a university sticker peeling off the lid, a phone charger, a paperback. "No jewelry," Marlene said loudly. "No perfume." Nothing you'd expect from someone who supposedly paid $4,000 for 2 seats. "We paid for the seats 11 days ago, Talia said. "You can see it on your own screen." "I can see plenty from here." She moved to Danielle's bag and pulled it toward her without asking. Danielle made a small sound. Inside, on top of everything, lay a stack of memorial programs, still warm-smelling from the print shop. Marlene lifted them, looked at the photograph of the old man on the front, and dropped them back in. Cute. 6 rows back, Rosalind Pike stood up, moved to the end of her row, and raised her phone. She started recording at 10:58. She did not say a word. She simply held the camera steady and let it run. Others watched too. A man in a suit looked at the floor. A mother turned her son's face away and whispered something into his hair. 2 college kids near the window filmed for 9 seconds, laughed, and went back to their game. A woman in a red coat stood halfway up, then sat down again and put her hands in her lap. Nobody spoke. 300 people and not one voice. That silence became the loudest thing in the room. Talia stayed on her knees beside the open bag. She looked up at the woman standing over her, and she made herself think clearly, because thinking clearly was the only weapon she had. "Ma'am, I'd like to say 3 things. You'd like to leave is what you'd like. First, our reservation is confirmed and paid. Second, under the contract of carriage, a denial of boarding requires a stated reason and a printed notice. Third, I've asked twice for your employee number and you've refused twice." Something changed in Marlene's face, not fear, irritation, the sharp kind, the kind that comes when a person expects a target and gets a witness. "Where did you learn that speech?" "I read the contract before we flew." "Sure you did." Curtis Bellamy came back at 11:01, walking fast, tablet under his arm. "Problem?" 2 fraudulent passes and a mouth on this one, Marlene said. "I need you to sign off." Curtis looked at the sisters for less than 2 seconds. He did not look at the boarding passes lying on the counter. He did not touch the scanner. He did not open the reservation on his own tablet. That would have taken him 11 seconds. He tapped his screen twice and said, "Approved, your gate, your call." Talia turned to him. "Sir, you didn't check anything." "I checked with my agent." "You didn't scan the pass." "Ma'am, lower your voice." Talia had not raised her voice, not once, not 1 decibel, but she had learned that too years ago. The volume of a black woman is measured on a different scale. She let it go. There were 4 minutes left. "Then scan it yourself," she said. 4 seconds. If I'm lying, arrest me." For one moment, Curtis hesitated. His hand moved an inch toward the scanner on the podium. Later, in a conference room with a lawyer on speakerphone, he would be asked about that inch. He would have nothing to say. Marlene put her hand flat over the scanner. "Don't," she said to him. "I've been doing this since before she was born." Curtis dropped his hand. He walked away toward the next gate, and he did not look back. And that was the second thing that could never be taken back. Marlene went back behind the podium and picked up the passes again. She read the top line out loud slowly for the benefit of the room. "Granger, Talia? Granger, Danielle." She laughed once through her nose. Sounds made up. The name meant nothing to her. She had set it into a live microphone at a Meridian Atlantic gate in a Meridian Atlantic terminal. The ribbon was 200 feet away. The name meant nothing to her. Alia took out her phone and called the airline's customer line. She put it on speaker so the counter could hear it. A recorded voice thanked her for her loyalty. Then a live agent came on cheerful 3 states away. I can see the reservation, ma'am. 2 first-class seats, paid, confirmed, checked in this morning. The gate agent won't board us. Oh, that's a gate decision. I'm not able to override the gate. Can you tell her what you just told me? I can't call the gate directly, ma'am. The gate has final authority. Marlene leaned toward the phone. Thank you, she said sweetly and reached across the counter and ended the call with one finger. Talia stood very still for a second. Then she opened the Notes app on her phone and started typing. Times. 10:51 denied at counter, 10:54 ID taken, 10:56 public announcement, 10:58 bags opened on the floor, 11:01 supervisor approved without checking. She would still have that list 19 days later in a room full of lawyers. Every timestamp would match the airline's own system. Danielle asked if she could have some water. Her voice came out very small. There's a machine past security, Marlene said. Oh, wait. You're not going past security today, are you? An older man 2 rows away finally spoke. Ma'am, that's enough. Sir, do you want to be removed as well? He sat back down. He looked at his shoes. He would think about that moment for a long time. Marlene turned to the gate area and spread her hands, performing Now Warm and Reasonable, playing to the crowd she believed was on her side. Folks, I'm sorry for the delay. We take fraud seriously. People try this every single day, and they always pick a busy flight, and they always get loud when they're caught. A few heads nodded. That was the part Talia would remember for years, not the insults. The nodding. Danielle stood and put the memorial programs back in her bag, one at a time. Her hands would not do more than one at a time. Our grandfather's service is at 4, she said. We're the family. We're supposed to be there. Marlene did not even look at her. Everybody's got a story. He was a mechanic, Danielle said. He worked on planes for 31 years. And I've worked this gate for 22, so we're both very impressive. Talia put a hand on her sister's back and moved her away from the counter. She could see where the next 10 minutes were going. She needed Danielle out of the center of it. Ma'am, Talia said, one more time. Scan the pass. If it fails, I'll walk out of this terminal and I won't say another word. Marlene looked at the 2 passes on the counter beside her keyboard. The scanner was 8 inches from her right hand. It was a black plastic wedge with a red line in it, and it took 4 seconds, and it would have ended everything. She picked up the passes and put them face down. No, she said. Why not? Because I don't have to. Marlene picked up the podium phone and called the next gate over. She did not lower her voice. Hey, you busy? No, I've got 2 of them down here trying it on with first-class passes. She listened, then laughed. I know, every week now. They think the uniform can't read. She hung up and went back to her keyboard. Danielle's wallet was still open on top of her bag. The photograph inside had worked loose during the search. A small square of a man in coveralls standing in front of an engine cowling, squinting into the sun. It slid out and landed face up on the terminal floor. Danielle bent for it. Leave the floor alone, Marlene said. You've made enough of a mess. So the picture stayed where it fell in the middle of the bright walkway. People stepped around it. One man stepped on the corner without noticing. Danielle watched every one of them do it. At 11:03, the flight attendant closed the jet bridge door. Talia heard it. It was not a loud sound. It was a soft mechanical thud 40 feet away. It moved the front row of a church in Charlotte out of reach. Danielle sat down on the floor beside the open bag and put her face in her hands. Marlene gathered the 2 boarding passes, squared their edges, and set them beside her keyboard. The sisters could see them. They could not reach them. Sit over there, she said, pointing at the empty rows. I'll get to you when I get to you. The morning sun had moved across the terminal floor while all of this happened. It fell on the 2 open bags, on the black dress, on the stack of memorial programs. An old man's face looked up from every one. Rosalind Pike kept filming. The plane pushed back at 11:14. Talia watched it go through the glass. The morning light was so strong on the tarmac that the fuselage looked white instead of blue. 2 seats on that aircraft were paid for, confirmed, and empty, and they were 2A and 2B. Danielle had stopped crying. That was worse. She sat in the second row with her bag on her lap and her eyes on the carpet, folded down into herself. People go quiet like that when they decide they were stupid to expect anything. Talia sat beside her and started working the problem. She called the airline again and got a different agent. This one heard the whole story, made a sympathetic sound, and put her on hold for 6 minutes. Ma'am, I've spoken with my supervisor. The gate has authority on boarding decisions. I can rebook you for a fee. There shouldn't be a fee. We were never boarded. The record shows a denial at the gate. Once that's in the record, I can't waive it. Who put it in the record? The gate agent, ma'am. There it was. The circle. The gate decides. The airline defers to the gate. And the gate is a woman with a microphone who has already decided what you are. Talia hung up and walked back to the counter. She did it calmly. Danielle was watching. Ma'am, two things. I need our identification back, and I need the denial in writing. Marlene was typing. She did not look up. I'm documenting the incident. What incident? This one. At 11:22, Marlene Radcliffe typed this into the reservation record. Her own hands, her own login, a company workstation. PAX presented invalid documentation, aggressive and non-compliant, refused lawful instruction, recommend no rebooking, recommend security watch. Every word of it was false. Every word of it was time-stamped. Every word of it would be read out loud later in a room she would very much wish to leave. She hit save at 11:22 and 41 seconds. Then she slid both driver's licenses across the counter face down and kept the boarding passes. You can go now, she said. There's a hotel shuttle on level 1. We don't need a hotel. We need to be in Charlotte by 4. Should have thought of that before you tried to scam a flight. Talia looked at her for a long moment, not with hatred, with something colder and more useful. The look of a person who has decided to remember everything. What's your name, ma'am? Your full name. You already know it. It's on my badge. You turned your badge around. Marlene turned it back slowly and lifted her chin. Her name sat there in white letters on a blue field. She was proud of it. That detail would matter. Marlene Radcliffe, she said. Radcliffe. Write it down. Nothing is going to happen to me. Talia wrote it down. Behind her, a woman's voice said, I have all of it. Rosalind Pike had come up the aisle with her phone still recording, a school nurse from Pueblo. She had never once inserted herself into a stranger's argument. Since 10:56, she said. Everything she said, everything you said, it's all on here. Ma'am, step back, Marlene said. This doesn't concern you. I'm not talking to you. Rosalind wrote her name and number on the back of a receipt and pressed it into Talia's hand. Then she sat 4 seats away and kept the camera running. She did not move for 20 minutes. Curtis Bellamy came back at 11:31. The flight had gone out 11 minutes late, and someone upstairs wanted to know why. What's the delay code? Fraudulent boarding attempt, Marlene said. 2 passengers. 2. Curtis typed it in. He was 38 years old, 4 months into an acting supervisor role, and he wanted it to become permanent. He had a simple and very human rule for that. Don't create problems, back your agents, move on. He typed the code, signed the entry, and moved on. Talia stepped in front of him. Sir, I'm asking you directly. Will you scan this pass? The passes are with the agent now. It's her incident. You're the supervisor, and she's been here 22 years. That isn't an answer. Curtis looked at her, then really looked for the first time all morning. He saw a young woman in a black dress and flat shoes. She held a receipt with a stranger's number on it. Around her sat a hall full of people who had watched her searched on the floor. For a second, something moved behind his eyes. Then he said, Have a good day, ma'am, and walked away. Talia opened the airline's app and tried to buy 2 new seats on the 115. The app refused her. It refused her twice more. On the 3rd attempt, a red banner came up across the screen. This reservation requires agent assistance. Please see a Meridian Atlantic representative. She read it twice. Then she understood. The note Marlene had typed 9 minutes earlier was attached to their names now. Every screen in the company would read it first. She walked 2 gates down to B24 and waited at that counter until the agent there had to look at her. I need to buy 2 seats to Charlotte. The woman glanced at her screen, and then her face did something complicated. She looked past Talia down the concourse toward B22, where Marlene was standing with her arms crossed and her eyes already on them. I'm sorry, the agent said quietly. I can't touch this record. You can't or you won't. The agent typed nothing. She looked at Talia with an apology she was not brave enough to say out loud, and then she looked away. That was the moment Talia understood the shape of the thing. It was not one woman at one podium. It was one woman at one podium and 40 other people. 40 people who had decided quietly that this was not their morning to be difficult. She went back and sat down beside her sister. Danielle was on the phone with their aunt in Charlotte. She was trying to sound normal. No, we're fine. There's just a delay. Tell everyone we're coming. Talia could hear the other end. Church noise, chairs being set out, somebody testing a microphone in a sanctuary 2,000 miles away. They saved 2 seats in the front, Danielle said when she hung up. For us. I know. He put us in the front row at church every Sunday of my life. I know. Danielle wiped her face with the back of her wrist and looked out at the runway, at the bright, empty sky where their flight had gone. Talia, do we call Dad? Talia did not answer right away. Their father had raised them on one sentence, and he had said it so often that both girls could do the voice. Handle what you can handle yourself. He had made them change their own tires and fight their own school fights and write their own appeals. No, Talia said. He's got a long day. We handle this. Okay. We handle it. She meant it. She would have kept meaning it all the way out of that terminal if the morning had gone any other way. The sun kept climbing. It came through the glass at a steeper angle now and lit the whole concourse white. Down at the far end, past the moving walkway, a crew was setting up 2 rows of chairs and a small stage, ribbon scissors, a lectern with the airline's name on the front. A photographer was testing his flash. Above all of it hung a row of new banners, 12 feet tall, still half-wrapped in plastic. Scaffolding covered the one nearest gate, B-22. It hid everything on that banner except a shoulder in a dark suit and one hand. Nobody at gate B-22 looked up. At 11:39, Marlene picked up the phone again, not the podium line this time, the other one. Yes, this is B-22. I need officers, please. 2 disruptive passengers refusing to leave the gate area. Talia heard it. She turned around, and for the first time that morning her voice came out unsteady. We are sitting in chairs. Marlene put her hand over the receiver and smiled. Not for long. The officers arrived at 11:46. There were 2 of them, airport police, both polite, both bored. The younger one was named Wade Coleman, and he had been on shift since 5 that morning. He came up to the podium first. What have we got? 2 passengers refusing to leave the gate area, Marlene said. They've been aggressive with staff. It's all documented. Coleman looked over at the aggressive passengers. One of them was sitting with her hands folded. The other was standing beside 2 closed bags in a black dress, holding a receipt. They look pretty calm to me. They've been at it for an hour. Read the record. He read the record. That was the trap, and Marlene had built it herself 40 minutes earlier in 4 sentences she typed with her own fingers. Aggressive and non-compliant, refused lawful instruction, recommend security watch. Coleman's face changed. Once that language is in a file, it stops being an opinion. It becomes a fact that everyone else acts on. Ma'am, he said to Talia, I'm going to have to ask you both to come with me. For sitting in a chair? For a gate refusal. It's in the system. Then read me the reason out loud. Ma'am, I've asked 6 times for that reason in writing. 6. She's refused every time. Marlene leaned into the microphone one last time. She made the announcement that ended her career in a voice loud enough to reach the food court. Attention gate B-22. The 2 black girls at this counter are refused boarding and banned from Meridian Atlantic. Security is removing them now. Thank you for your patience. 300 people heard it. Rosalind Pike's phone caught every syllable. Danielle stood up because she was told to. She reached for her wallet and for the photograph still lying on the floor. Leave it, ma'am, Officer Coleman said, not unkindly. We'll come back for it. So she left her grandfather's picture where it was. Then they walked. 2 young women walked between 2 officers down the center of Concourse B in the brightest light of the day, past the coffee kiosk, past the newsstand, past the moving walkway where people stepped aside and looked and did not look. Danielle kept her chin up for 11 steps, then she broke. The sound she made was not loud. It was the worst sound in that building. Talia held her sister's arm and kept walking. She did not cry. Sometime around 11 o'clock, she had decided not to give this terminal a single tear. 200 feet ahead at the new wing, a small crowd stood around a ribbon. There were maybe 40 people there. City officials, 2 reporters, a photographer on one knee, a row of Meridian Atlantic executives in dark suits. At the front of them stood a tall black man of 54 gray, coming in at his temples, holding a pair of oversized silver scissors. He was 3 seconds from cutting the ribbon on the terminal he had spent 4 years building. He heard a sound he knew. Elias Granger had heard that particular cry before. He had heard it when Danielle was 6 and came off a bicycle onto gravel. A father does not mistake that sound. Not at any distance, not in any building on Earth. He turned his head. The scissors hit the floor. They landed blade first on polished concrete, and the sound cracked through the ceremony like a gunshot. 40 people turned. The photographer's flash went off by accident. Elias Granger was already walking. He walked past the ribbon and past the lectern with his own company's name on it. He walked faster. Then he was not walking. Take your hands off my daughters! The whole concourse heard it. It was not a shout. It came out low and torn open. It was the voice of a man who had just found the one thing he spent his life preventing. Officer Coleman stopped. Sir, step back, please. Take your hands off my daughters. Sir, that is Talia Granger. That is Danielle Granger. They are 22 and 19 years old, and they are my children. For 1 full second, nobody in that hall moved. Then Danielle broke away and hit her father's chest and folded there. Elias put one hand on the back of her head and held on. His hand was shaking. Everyone standing close enough saw it shake. He looked at Talia over her sister's shoulder. Baby, are you hurt? No. Tell me the truth. No, Daddy, we're not hurt. That was when he saw the whole picture. 2 officers, 2 young women in funeral clothes, 2 bags, and every stranger in that concourse holding up a phone. He turned to the executives who had followed him. His voice went flat and quiet, and the people who worked for him had heard that voice maybe twice in 9 years. Nobody leaves this concourse. Then he crossed to Officer Coleman and put out his hand for the paperwork. Officer, what were you told? Sir, we responded to a call for disruptive passengers. It's in the airline's own record. Whose record? Gate B-22? Elias Granger looked down the length of the terminal, at the podium, at the woman standing behind it with a microphone in her hand. Marlene Radcliffe had not moved in 90 seconds. She was looking up, because directly above Gate B-22, 12 feet tall, half wrapped in plastic and half hidden by scaffolding, hung the new banner for the new concourse. The scaffolding covered most of it. It covered the shoulder and the hand and the word underneath. 2 workers had started rolling the scaffolding away at 11:50, exactly as scheduled for the noon ceremony. The plastic came down. The banner came clear. A photograph of a man in a dark suit, 12 feet high, and printed across the bottom in white letters, Meridian Atlantic, Elias Granger, Chief Executive Officer, welcome to Concourse B. Marlene looked at the face on the banner. Then she looked at the man walking toward her podium with a 19-year-old girl still holding onto his arm. Then she looked down at the counter. 2 boarding passes lay face down beside her keyboard, never scanned. A surname was printed on both of them. She had read that surname into a live microphone an hour earlier and laughed at it. Behind him, the ceremony fell apart in stages. The city councilman lowered his phone. The 2 reporters looked at each other, and then both of them started walking fast in the same direction. The photographer picked his camera back up. Adele Fontaine, the airline's senior vice president of operations, took one look at her chief executive's face and said 4 words into her radio. Hold the noon ceremony. Curtis Bellamy came around the corner from B-24 at a jog, tablet under his arm because someone had told him there was a situation with the executive party. He arrived just in time to see who was standing at his gate. He stopped so fast his shoes squeaked on the floor. He looked at Elias Granger. He looked at the 12-foot banner overhead. He looked at the 2 young women he had refused to spend 11 seconds on. The color came out of his face in one long pull. "Oh, God," Curtis said. Marlene was still behind the podium with her hand near the scanner. "Sir?" she said. Her voice came out wrong, high and thin. "Sir, there was a documentation issue. I was following procedure." Elias did not answer her. He walked past the podium instead to the spot on the floor where the sun was falling. Then he crouched down in a $4,000 suit in front of 40 cameras. He picked up a photograph. He turned it over in his hands. A man in coveralls standing in front of an engine cowling, squinting into the sun. His own father. Amos Granger had spent 31 years as a mechanic. He had worked on aircraft for 4 different carriers, and he had never once been allowed to sit in the front of any of them. His son had built a terminal. His granddaughters had been searched on its floor. Elias Granger knelt there for a long moment with that picture in his hand. Then he stood up, and when he turned around his eyes were wet, and he did not care who saw it. "His service is at 4 o'clock, he said to nobody, to everybody, in Charlotte. My daughters were going home to bury my father." She reached for the scanner. An hour too late, Marlene Radcliffe finally reached for the scanner. "Don't touch it," Elias said. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. Every camera in that terminal was already pointed at the 2 of them. "Nobody touches that counter until somebody explains to me why my daughters were on the floor of my terminal." What happened next took 11 minutes, and Meridian Atlantic live-streamed none of it. It did not have to. 60 phones were already running. Elias Granger walked back to gate B-22 and stood on the passenger side of the counter where his daughters had stood. "Miss Fontaine, open the record." Adele Fontaine came around the podium and logged in on her own credentials. The screen threw its blue light up onto both their faces. "Read me the reservation." 2 seats, first class, 2A and 2B, purchased 11 days ago on a personal card, paid in full, checked in this morning at 9:51. "Any flag on the record before today?" "None." "Any scan attempt at this gate?" Adele scrolled. She scrolled again. Then she stopped. "No, sir. There is no scan attempt on either pass, not one." The concourse had gone so quiet that people heard the air handlers. Elias picked up the 2 boarding passes. They had been lying face down for over an hour. He handed them to Officer Coleman. "Officer, would you scan those for me, please? You're neutral." Coleman took them. He held the first one under the red line. The scanner chirped. Green light. Valid. Granger Talia, 2A. He held up the second one. Chirp. Green light. Valid. Granger Danielle, 2B. 4 seconds. Both of them. That was all it had ever needed. Somebody in the gate area said out loud, "Oh my God." Ms. Fontaine, Elias said, read the incident note. The one entered at 11:22 this morning. Read it exactly as it was typed. Adele hesitated. Sir, in front of? She said it in front of them. She can hear it in front of them. So Adele Fontaine read it in a clear voice into a hall holding 300 people and 2 reporters. Pax presented invalid documentation, aggressive and non-compliant, refused lawful instruction, recommend no rebooking, recommend security watch. Who entered that? Employee number 31902, Radcliffe Marlene, gate B22. And is any part of it true? Adele looked at the screen. She looked at the 2 green scans on the podium. She had worked for this company for in the way that people talk when they can feel the floor going. Sir, I have 22 years here. 22 years. I have never had a complaint, not one, and I was protecting the flight. There are fraud attempts every single week. How many passengers did you scan this morning? She stopped. What? How many? Before my daughters, how many passes did you put under that scanner? All of them. The whole flight. How many of those passengers did you ask for identification? Silence. How many did you ask to open their bags on the floor? Silence. How many did you announce over a public address system? Sir? 2, Elias said. The number is 2, and you know exactly what those 2 had in common. Marlene's mouth opened, and nothing came out of it. Say it, Elias said quietly. Not for me, for the 300 people who watched and said nothing. She did not say it. She never would not, that day. Not in the hearing, not in any interview she would later refuse to give. Elias turned to Curtis Bellamy. You're the supervisor on duty? Yes, sir. My daughter asked you directly to scan a boarding pass. What did you check before you refused? Curtis looked at his shoes. 38 years old, 4 months into an acting role he had wanted very badly. Nothing, sir, he said. I didn't check anything. Thank you for being honest. It's 11 minutes too late. Adele Fontaine collected Marlene's airport badge and her gate credentials at 11:58. She did it quietly, without a speech, and she laid them in a plastic tray on the counter as though they were nothing at all. Marlene stared at the tray. I've had that badge for 22 years. You wrote your own file this morning, Adele said. Every line of it. Officer Coleman and his partner walked Marlene Radcliffe out of Concourse B, past the coffee kiosk, past the newsstand, past the moving walkway. The same route, the same bright morning light. 300 people watching. Nobody laughed. Rosalind Pike came forward before anyone asked her to. I have all of it, she said, from 10:56, 14 minutes of video. Adele Fontaine took her name and her number. The 2 reporters took it as well. You could have kept walking, Elias said to her. I almost did, Rosalind said. That's the part I'll be thinking about. Then Elias Granger turned to his older daughter. Baby, you talk, not me. It's yours. And Talia Granger stepped up to the podium her sister had cried in front of, and she spoke as a passenger because that is what she had been all morning. I don't want anybody fired for hurting my feelings, she said. That's not what this was. She held up one of the passes. This is a valid ticket. I asked her 6 times to scan it. It takes 4 seconds. She wouldn't spend 4 seconds because of what we look like. She let that sit. And here's the part I need you to hear. If our name had been anything else, we'd be in a hotel right now, missing our grandfather's funeral, carrying a lie in a file we could never get out. That happens to somebody in this building every week. They just don't have a father who happens to walk by. 300 people, not one phone down. So don't clap for us, Talia said. Clap when the next 2 girls don't need a miracle. Nobody clapped. Then somewhere near the window, one person started, and it went through that concourse like weather. The airline held the 115 to Charlotte for 11 minutes. Adele Fontaine cleared the incident note off the record while the sisters watched, line by line, until their names were clean. Then she reissued 2A and 2B and walked the sisters down the jet bridge herself. The captain met them at the aircraft door. She was a small woman with silver hair and 40 years in the left seat. Ladies, she said, I've been flying for this company a long time. I am sorry. Sit down and let us take you to your grandfather. Danielle carried her wallet in both hands the whole way down the aisle. The photograph was back inside it, corner-creased, wiped clean with a napkin by a chief executive on the floor of his own terminal. They landed in Charlotte at 3:02. An aunt met them at the curb with the engine running and a garment bag in the back seat. They changed at the church. Danielle washed her face twice and put the photograph in the inside pocket of her dress over her heart. She was not going to let go of it again. At 4 o'clock, 2 young women walked to the front row. Amos Granger had worked on aircraft for 31 years. 9 of his old crew came in union jackets. They sat in the 3rd row with their caps in their hands. The program had his face on the front, the same picture that had been stepped on that morning in Denver. Danielle gave the eulogy. She was 19 years old, and her voice did not shake. My grandfather fixed the planes, she said. He was never invited to sit in the front of one. So we're sitting in the front row today for him. Elias Granger sat behind his daughters and cried like a man at his father's funeral, which is exactly what he was. The video went out that night. Rosalind Pike never posted it. She handed it to the airline and to a reporter. She asked for nothing and declined every interview she was offered. It ran on the local news at 6, and it was everywhere by 10. 14 minutes unedited in bright morning light. Meridian Atlantic did not issue a denial because there was nothing to deny. The internal investigation closed 19 days later. Marlene Radcliffe was terminated for cause. Not for the insults, which the report noted but could not measure. She was terminated for 3 things. False statements entered into a passenger record. 6 documented refusals to verify a valid ticket. A security removal initiated on the basis of her own false entry. Her airport credential was pulled system-wide. Every carrier in that terminal saw the record. She had written every line of it herself at 11:22 in the morning with her own login. Curtis Bellamy lost the acting supervisor role. He was not fired. He asked in writing to keep working the floor. The company changed 4 things and put all 4 in writing. Any denial of boarding now requires an independent supervisor to scan the document and sign it. All podium announcements naming a passenger are prohibited. Bag searches at gates are prohibited outside the checkpoint. Every passenger refused transport receives a printed reason at the gate in hand before they walk away. They named the internal policy after nobody. Elias refused that. Put a number on it, he said. Not a family name. This is not about my family. 3 weeks after that, 400 employees filled a training hall in Denver. Talia Granger had made one request, and it was the only thing she ever asked the company for. Marlene Radcliffe came. Nobody made her. She stood at a lectern in a room full of people who used to work beside her. She read 4 sentences out loud off a printed page in her own voice. PAX presented invalid documentation, aggressive and non-compliant, refused lawful instruction, recommends security watch. Then she said, I wrote that about 2 women I never checked. She did not cry. Nobody comforted her, and she did not ask them to. She folded the paper and walked out. That was the last time anyone in that company saw her. Curtis Bellamy was in the second row. He was the first person to sign up for the session. Rosalind Pike spoke at the same training, 4 minutes, no notes. I almost kept walking, she told them. That's the only thing I did wrong, and I did it for 2 whole minutes before I stood up. Elias Granger never gave the speech he had written for the ribbon cutting. He gave a different one, on the same spot, 11 days later, with the scissors somebody had picked up off the floor. I built a beautiful building, he said. I never once stood at my own gate at 10:40 in the morning to watch how we treat people who can't do anything for us. That is on me. A good airline cannot run on luck, and my daughters got lucky. Nobody else should have to. Then he cut the ribbon and he went back to work. Talia Granger flies Meridian Atlantic about once a month now. She still boards with the first-class group. She still hands over the pass and waits for the green light and the small chirp of the scanner. Every single time she notices how long 4 seconds takes. Danielle keeps the photograph in her wallet. The corner is still creased. She has never replaced it. There's one more thing worth saying, and it is the whole reason this story is worth 11 minutes of your day. The sisters did nothing to save themselves. They asked politely. They quoted the rules. They wrote down the times. They did every single thing correctly, and none of it worked, and it was never going to work. What saved them was an accident. A man who happened to be walking down that concourse at 11:49 in the morning and who happened to be their father. Take him out of the story and nothing changes at that gate. 2 young women miss a funeral. A false report sits in a file forever, and 300 people go home and tell nobody. So the question is not whether this happens. The question is what you do at 10:56. When it is happening 8 feet away and you are still deciding whether it is your business. Rosalind Pike almost kept walking. She has said so out loud more than once. The only difference between her and everybody else in that concourse is about 2 minutes. Tell me in the comments at that gate that morning, what would you have done? If this story moved you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who finally get their day. Because dignity should never depend on who your father is.
The story is over, but one thing keeps sticking with me. 3 words, not my job. Lauren could have said them and nobody would have blamed her. She mopped the floors, she emptied the trash. Nowhere in that job description did it say, notice what the nursing needs. Nowhere did it say, speak up when the doctor will listen. Nowhere did it say, risk everything for a patient whose name you only know from the whiteboard you whip down every morning. She spoke up anyway, not because it was her job, because it was her room, and that's what we keep getting wrong. We build this whole system around lens, stay indoors, mind your business, that's above your pay grade. Most of the time, yours lane go fine, but every once in a while, the thing that me saying is sitting in the mouth of the person nobody thinks should say it. Lorraine wasn't a nurse, wasn't a doctor. She was the woman with the mark who spent more hours in that room than anyone with stethoscope. She saw what they missed because she was there every single day, paying attention to a room everyone else was through. So, but the thing you have been noticing that you haven't said because you decided is was jobless. Drop it in the comments. Share this with someone who noticed. And if you haven't subscribed, you already know.